What if I told you that the greatest miracle in the Bible wasn't the parting of the Red Sea, but what happened right after? It's a story of betrayal, death, and divine fury that most people have never heard. Moses climbs Mount Sinai, leaving his people behind. For 40 days, they wait. But what happens next will shock you. 3,000 people dead in a single day, a golden idol smashed to dust, and a glowing face that strikes fear into the hearts of an entire nation. This is the dark truth of Mount Sinai. Picture this, a sea of people stretching as far as the eye can see. They're tired, their feet ache, but hope shines in their eyes. This massive crowd walks slowly through a barren desert, leaving behind the only life they've ever known. These are the Israelites, newly freed from centuries of slavery in Egypt. Freedom tastes sweet, but it comes with its own set of challenges. Moses faces a daunting task, turning these former slaves into a unified people with a shared purpose. These people have spent generations following orders, working under the crack of the whip. Now, they must learn to make decisions, to govern themselves, to trust in a God they can't see. The journey to Mount Sinai is a spiritual awakening. With every step, the Israelites shed their old identities as slaves and embrace their new role as God's chosen people. But old habits die hard. They complain about the lack of food and water, longing for the security of their old lives in Egypt. Moses has to be more than just a leader. He's a teacher, a judge, a mediator between the people and God. But Moses isn't alone in this. God's promise guides them through the wilderness. When they're hungry, manna falls from the sky. When they're thirsty, water springs from a rock. These miracles teach the Israelites to trust in God's provision. As they travel, the landscape slowly changes. The flat desert gives way to rocky terrain. In the distance, a mountain looms. This is Mount Sinai, their destination. The mountain stands silent, wrapped in mystery. It holds the key to their future, the blueprint for their new society. But it also harbors dangers they can't imagine. Will they rise to meet these challenges? Or will they crumble under the weight of their newfound freedom? The answer lies waiting for them at the foot of Mount Sinai. And it's an answer that will shape not just their future, but the course of human history. But before we proceed to God's fiery revelation, I want you to be ready. So if you are ready, comment down, "I am ready," in the comments. The Israelites stood at the foot of Mount Sinai, unaware that their world was about to be shaken. What they were about to witness would make even the bravest among them tremble. Why would God choose such a terrifying way to reveal himself? After weeks of dusty travel, the Israelites finally reached Mount Sinai. They were tired, but hope filled their hearts. This mountain held the promise of meeting their God face to face. But nothing could have prepared them for what came next. Suddenly, the mountain disappeared behind thick, dark clouds. Lightning cracked across the sky, illuminating the rocky peaks. The ground beneath their feet began to shake violently. Thunder roared so loudly, it felt like it could split the earth. A trumpet blast, louder than anything human-made, pierced through the chaos, growing louder and louder. Can you imagine standing there? Your heart racing, your legs shaking, wondering if the ground might open up and swallow you whole. The Israelites huddled together, terrified. Some covered their ears, others fell to their knees. They had seen God's power before, but this was different. This was personal. God wasn't putting on a spectacle just to scare them. He had a purpose. This awesome display of power was preparing the Israelites for something big, something life-changing. Think about it. These people had been slaves. They were used to seeing the supposed power of Egyptian gods, statues that couldn't move, speak, or act. Now, they were face to face with the raw power of the true God, the God who had freed them, fed them, and led them through the desert. This was about respect, about understanding who they were dealing with. God was showing them that He wasn't just another deity. He was the all-powerful creator of the universe. As the mountain shook and smoked like a giant furnace, the Israelites began to grasp the significance of what was happening. This terrifying display was the prelude to something unprecedented. God was about to make a covenant with them. A covenant was a binding agreement, often between a king and his people. But this was the King of Kings choosing to bind himself to this poor group of former slaves. The magnitude of this moment was enormous. Through this awe-inspiring demonstration, God was preparing the Israelites for their new identity. They weren't just escapees from Egypt anymore. They were about to become God's chosen people, with all the privileges and responsibilities that came with it. The ground continued to shake. The trumpet roared on. And in the midst of this divine storm, the Israelites stood on the brink of a new era. Their lives were about to change forever. But what exactly did God have in store for them? As the dust settled from God's earth-shaking display, Moses faced a new challenge. He was about to climb Mount Sinai, leaving his people behind. The mountain still smoked from God's presence. Moses knew something big was coming. For 40 days and 40 nights, Moses stayed on that mountain. No food, no water. How is that even possible? Our bodies need water to survive. Without it, we typically last only a few days. But Moses endured for 40. This wasn't about human ability. It was about God's power. Many believe God Himself kept Moses alive. If God could part the Red Sea, couldn't He keep one man alive without food or water? The number 40 appears often in the Bible, marking times of testing or transformation. For Moses, these 40 days changed everything. While Moses talked with God, things weren't peaceful below. The Israelites grew restless. They couldn't see or hear Moses. Days turned into weeks. Doubt crept in. Would their leader ever come back? Up on the mountain, Moses received more than just the 10 Commandments. God gave him detailed instructions for nearly everything. How to build a special tent for worship, what clothes the priest should wear, even how to make holy perfume. Every little detail mattered to God. Exodus 24:18 tells us,
Then Moses entered the cloud as he went on up the mountain, and he stayed on the mountain 40 days and 40 nights.
Imagine being in God's presence for that long. No distractions, no other voices, just you and the Creator of the universe. But while Moses experienced this incredible time with God, trouble was brewing below. The people's patience was wearing thin. They wanted something they could see and touch, something to lead them. Moses' long absence was setting the stage for a shocking act of betrayal. As Moses continued to receive God's instructions, the future of Israel hung in the balance. The laws and guidelines he was getting would shape how an entire nation lived, worshipped, and treated each other. But would the people accept these new ways, or would 40 days prove too long to wait? Fear took over, making them forget the incredible things they'd witnessed. They gathered around Aaron, demanding, "Make us gods we can see." It's shocking, isn't it? These same people had experienced amazing miracles. But when God seemed far away, they wanted something familiar. Aaron faced a tough decision. Sadly, he gave in. "Bring me your gold earrings," he told them. The people eagerly handed over their jewelry. Aaron melted it down and shaped it into a golden calf. This wasn't just any statue. For the Israelites, fresh from Egypt, it represented a powerful God they could touch and see. When Aaron revealed the calf, the camp erupted in wild celebration. "These are your gods, O Israel, who brought you out of Egypt," they shouted. Up on the mountain, God's anger burned hot. He told Moses, "Go down quickly, your people have become corrupt." God threatened to destroy the nation and start over with Moses. But Moses pleaded for mercy, reminding God of his promises. This moment shows how easily we can lose our way. The Israelites had seen God's power, yet in a moment of doubt, they turned to a false idol. It reminds us that faith isn't just about what we've experienced. It's about trusting God even when He feels distant. The golden calf changed everything. It revealed that the journey from slavery to freedom was more than physical. The Israelites had left Egypt, but they still clung to old ways of thinking and old fears. As Moses came down the mountain, tablets in hand, he heard singing. But this wasn't joyful praise to God. It was the wild celebration of people who had forgotten their true deliverer. Imagine how Moses felt, realizing the depth of their betrayal. This story challenges us to think about our own faith. When have we been tempted to put our trust in things we can see and touch instead of in God? How do we stay faithful when God seems silent or far away? Imagine coming down from a mountain, carrying something precious, only to find chaos waiting for you. Imagine coming down from a mountain, carrying something precious, only to find chaos waiting for you. That's exactly what happened to Moses. As he descended Mount Sinai with stone tablets inscribed by God, wild singing and shouting reached his ears. His heart sank. This wasn't the sound of faithful people waiting for their leader. When Moses reached the camp, he saw a golden calf. The very people God had rescued were now worshiping this idol as their deliverer. Anger burned within Moses. With a cry of anguish, he threw the stone tablets to the ground, shattering them at the foot of the mountain. These weren't ordinary tablets. They were a physical piece of God's covenant. But Moses saw that the covenant was already broken. Moses took swift action. He ground the golden calf to powder, scattered it on water, and made the Israelites drink it. It was a harsh lesson. Their sin would become part of them. Yet even in this dark time, hope appeared. When Moses returned to the mountain to plead for the people, something amazing happened. Exodus 34:29 tells us,
When Moses came down from Mount Sinai with the 2 tablets of the covenant law in his hands, he was not aware that his face was radiant because he had spoken with the Lord.
Moses' face shone so brightly that it frightened the people. He had to wear a veil when he spoke to them. This glow was a visible sign that despite their failure, God's presence remained. The broken tablets and Moses' shining face teach us an important lesson. Even when we mess up badly, God doesn't give up on us. He's ready to start over, to make something beautiful out of our brokenness. Picture this: Moses stands at the camp entrance, his voice rising above the chaos. "Whoever is for the Lord, come to me." The Levites rush to his side, but what happens next is shocking. Moses orders them to kill their brothers, friends, and neighbors. By day's end, 3,000 people lie dead. Why such harsh judgment? It teaches us something crucial about God's character. He's holy and takes sin seriously. These people had just agreed to follow God. They'd seen His power firsthand. Yet at the first sign of trouble, they turned to a false idol. This wasn't just a mistake, it was a betrayal. Exodus 32:28 tells us,
The Levites did as Moses commanded, and that day about 3,000 of the people died.
this painful step removed the cancer of idolatry before it could spread. But Moses isn't done fighting for his people. He goes back up the mountain to plead with God. What he says next is amazing. He offers himself in place of the people, saying, "Please forgive their sin, but if not, then blot me out of the book you have written." God's response shows us His balance of judgment and mercy. He doesn't destroy the entire nation, but there are still consequences for their actions. This incident changes how the Israelites understand God. They learn that following Him comes with real responsibilities. They see the seriousness of sin and the cost of forgiveness. But they also witness incredible mercy. Think about your own life. Have you ever faced consequences for your actions, but also received unexpected mercy? That's the heart of this story. It reminds us that while God takes sin seriously, His love for us never fails. The Israelites move forward from this day forever changed. They carry a deeper understanding of who God is and what it means to be His people. It's a turning point in their journey from slaves to a nation set apart for God's purposes. But what if I told you that God gave them a second chance? A second chance to make things right. Imagine standing at the foot of Mount Sinai, the air heavy with tension. The Israelites had messed up big time, but God wasn't done with them yet. He told Moses to make new stone tablets, just like the broken ones. This simple act showed God's incredible mercy. Moses climbed that mountain again, his heart pounding. He stood before God, hoping for forgiveness. And you know what? God showed a side of Himself that would change everything. God said, the Lord, the compassionate and gracious God, slow to anger, abounding in love and faithfulness, maintaining love to thousands, and forgiving wickedness, rebellion, and sin. Yet He does not leave the guilty unpunished." These words revealed God's two sides. He's ready to forgive, but He also takes sin seriously. God agreed to start over with Israel, but with stricter terms. This wasn't a casual commitment. It required their whole hearts. When Moses came down, his face glowed with divine light. It was a powerful sign that God was still with them, despite their failure. But it also reminded them of the huge gap between God's holiness and their shortcomings. This second chance reshaped how the Israelites saw God. They learned His love was bigger than their mistakes, but their actions had real consequences. Think about a time someone forgave you after a big mess up. How did it make you feel? The Israelites probably felt all those emotions and more. Every time they looked at those new tablets, they'd remember both their failure and God's amazing mercy. This wasn't just a second chance. It changed how people would understand God for generations. A God who hates sin but loves sinners. A God of second chances who calls us to live differently. How would this shape Israel's future? Only time would tell. But one thing was certain: their relationship with God would never be the same. The Israelites' experience at Mount Sinai changed them forever. They left carrying God's law and the memory of their golden calf mistake. This shaped how they'd build their new society. God's law became the blueprint for their lives. It guided everything from worship to treating neighbors. But the golden calf incident stayed with them too, a warning of what could happen if they strayed. Sinai transformed these former slaves into a nation with a purpose. God chose them to show others what living under His rule looked like. This new identity came with big responsibilities. They had to learn to trust God in tough times and resist old ways of thinking. It wasn't easy. They often stumbled, but each time they got back up, they grew stronger. The lessons from Sinai didn't stay in the past. They still influence faith and culture today. The Ten Commandments remain a moral foundation for many societies. The idea of a loving God who forgives but expects obedience shapes millions of lives. For Jews, Christians, and Muslims, Sinai reminds us of second chances and that our actions have consequences. When facing big decisions, we can learn from the Israelites. They discovered that obeying God leads to life, while turning away brings trouble. Their journey shows us that real change often comes through trials, and our biggest failures can lead to deeper faith. But did you know that the Israel from Moses' time looks nothing like what you see on TV today? The land where Moses led his people has changed so much you wouldn't believe it. From a desert where people wandered for 40 years to modern cities with tall buildings, the change is mind-blowing. Want to know something crazy? The place where Moses received the Ten Commandments might shock you when you see what's there now. And those ancient trails the Israelites walked on. Wait until you see what they've become. But here's the biggest surprise. Remember how Moses struggled to lead his people through the wilderness? Well, the challenges that modern Israel faces will leave you speechless. In our next video, we're going to show you exactly how Israel has transformed from Moses' time to 2025. You'll see things that will make your jaw drop, like how the same lands where biblical stories happened look totally different today. If you thought today's video was interesting, just wait until you see what we've discovered about modern Israel. Click the video on your screen right now to uncover the dark reality of how Israel has changed. Trust me, you don't want to miss this one.